I think it would be difficult to have this conversation if we did not talk about December 4th, 2024. That was the day that we had that tragic assassination of the CEO of United Healthcare Global, Brian Thompson. And so I think for today's panel, we really wanted to focus in on what have we seen happen to executive protection in the past 7 months since that very fateful incident. And lately we've been seeing larger budgets for EP. We've been seeing more board and leadership attention. And we've also been seeing job descriptions have a greater focus in their senior security leadership around EP. So with that in mind, Diego, I'd love to hear about what EP is looking like in Brazil and for your company today.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's a challenge for us, executive protections in Brazil. I don't know if all of you have an idea how is the program in Brazil, but we built one entire department with the confidence of our executives doing a great job in executive protection. But it's always a challenge. And I can give you a context about it. It's because the increase of the violence is a reality in Brazil. And the pillar social of the ESG agenda is a challenge for us because national and multinational companies want to go to favelas, for example, to provide the poor people better conditions of living. And for the executives, it's important to be there as well with the company, be close of the activities, bring it to the people sanitary conditions, painting house, for example, play soccer with the teenagers there, and they come to us and asking to be there. This is the challenge for us. We need to provide, because it's easy for all security managers to say no, but we need to understand that no is a sacred word for us. So we need to understand that we need to think in the best way and safest way to do the things. Of course, we need to put all the planning, intelligence, and technology if we have, collaborate operation with law enforcement and local police. But I think the most important part of the work is to have a frank conversation with the executives. Show them how professional we are on our planning, and don't work for them, but work with them. And I believe that it is the success of our work in our program. When I need to say, let's go, they just follow the instructions without questions because they understand, they have a situational awareness about what happened in Brazil.
Thank you, Diego. Very helpful response. Turning to you, Tim G, and feel free to expand on anything that Diego mentioned, but have you seen different emerging risks or operational disruptions since December, and how have you been navigating any changes to your EP strategy or working with your executives and adapting those strategies in real time?
Sure. Just a quick background about myself. So I'm the Chief Security Officer at Nardello and Company, so I'm responsible for the security of our 100 employees in 5 different countries, but I'm also client-facing. I head up the threat mitigation and physical security practice. So obviously after the shooting in December, it was my phone has been ringing off the hook, nonstop ever since. And it's like the board coming in, hey, we need protection for our executive, or the GC saying we need, and the first question is like, well, what am I protecting you from, right? We need to know what the threat environment is that you're in right now, and monitoring that threat on those threats online, and then putting together a package for that executive that fits in with their lifestyle, because like there's this misconception that, oh, this is great, I have security now. It's like 9 times out of 10 they don't want it, right? It's being forced upon them by their board, as well as sometimes the external attorneys. But it's something that it's new to a lot of executives, and as Diego said, it's like you work with them so they can still do what they need to do, but doing it in a safe manner.
Thanks, Tim. And we'll shift right over to other Tim. And
Sneakers
Tim.
Please.
Tim, I extend the same question overall to you, and I'm just wondering though, if you have a perspective on whether the traditional EP models that you've seen in the past, are they still relevant today and in this new environment?
Yeah, we should talk about that right before I came up, Jerry Bonillo, one of the premier executive protection providers in the US, gave me this coin. And it was like executive protection expert, but then I saw it said social media expert. And I feel like maybe that was a slight, like maybe our relationship's not where I thought it was, but. So I'll make this like a LinkedIn post. Normally, when companies inquire about executive protection, they want to talk about one of three things. Ninjas and shit, basically like, oh my gosh, ISIS, we don't know. The world might be falling in. How can you protect us? Or they want to talk about Mossad/Navy SEALs and shit. We want the biggest, baddest dudes ever to protect this person. Or they want to talk about ghosts and shit. Like, we actually know he needs protection, but we're afraid to bring it up. So, like, can you do a great job and nobody knows? But since the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, what I've noticed is the level of anxiety is for a different reason. Because when this gentleman was tragically assassinated, the assassin got so much public support, like the Luigi effect. Right now in San Francisco, there is a musical called Luigi, who is rewriting the story of why he did the right thing. It is sold out for the year. Think about that. And when that assassination occurred, these companies looked at their employees, they looked at the employees of other companies around them, and they said, wow, there's a lot of seeming support. Our environment has completely changed. We don't know how to protect against this. And so all of those forms of executive protection are valid, but I've started focusing on how are you actually managing workplace violence in an active way? How are you looking at people that could become upset? Just like you were saying, who doesn't like you right now? Who's talking about you on social media? When and why? Because as we know, ninjas do not affect the entire neighborhood uniformly, right? You may be fine today, you may be fine in this location, but then as the day changes, location changes, things change. And so I've really been taking the IO psychology approach. How are you addressing your people risk overall? And then applying that understanding to your C-suite.
Tim, before I turn over to Colin, I wanted to ask a follow-up. So because you do work with so many different clients, can you confirm that you've seen this trend of budgets expanding and this sense of urgency that there is a greater attention to this right now?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I've already renewed my ambassador status at Marriott this year, which is 100 nights. And I only have one client that I worked with last year that I'm working with this year. Every assignment I've been on has been a board mandated, we need to figure things out. It's been everything from an executive protection review to comprehensive, we need 9 residential assessments. We need this, all the way to companies who shockingly, brands that you see every time you go to the high-end malls, and they're like, so we have supply chain people, and they do our security, but we don't have a single security person. We think we need to look at what we might need. And that approach is actually good, to understand what we might need rather than just say, we need executive protection, we need guys, we need coverage. Because that, as we know, reactive thing, it's popular for a few months, and then the bills come in, and then they're like, well, that was a waste. And then they go way back to the left. We don't need anything because nothing happened. So,
thank you for that. So Colin, shifting over to you, again, feel free to share anything that you've seen changing over the last 7 months. And I would be curious to know if you think the current levels of attention and funding for EP will continue or be sustainable into the future, or do you see a different pathway?
No, I mean, I certainly think this is a bubble, right? We had a black swan event, and you have a very typical knee-jerk reaction across the industry. The number of firms in the DC area that are scrambling for executive protection people just to do things reminds me of the heydays of Iraq and Afghanistan when contractors were making $230,000 a year to go out there. The amount of money being thrown at executive protection because people don't really know what they're asking for right now is a problem. And as a CSO, where I get into this and have been asked that question, what are we doing for executive protection? Why don't I have it? It's a real challenge when you have to look your boss in the face and say, because you don't need it. Like, I'm sorry, you're not on anybody's radar. No. And here's why. We have a very good security program. We do comprehensive threat assessments. We know what our risk levels are, and we're not there. And that's not a bad thing, but it can be a really hard thing to do. And it's harder still when boards say, well, we're going to mandate this in a board meeting, to stand in front of them and say, all you're doing is throwing away money that's going to affect your bottom line, and I'm going to have to fire all these people in 6 months when you realized how much you just spent. And so it's a real challenge to balance the needle. Now, on the other side, you do have companies that realized, and Tim just did a great job bringing it up, of, oh my God, I got the supply chain people running all my security. Maybe someone should actually look at this and see what we need. And I think a Black Swan event creates an opportunity where you can help people right size. The challenge is how to do it right and really resist the urge to go all in. But I don't know if this is an American phenomenon or a global phenomenon. Something happens, we love to overreact to a degree, to exponentially to the 17th power when something happens, rather than going, hold on, what are we doing? Was this just not a freak event, but is this something that could affect us based on what we have in place, yes or no, and build from there rather than just go, here's $7 million, I want a 22-man ninja SAS team, and no. And then being that person that says no.
Excellent. And I think you bring up a good point, which other panelists touched upon. And it sounds like there's a need for some re-education of the senior leadership team and the board. So I open this up to any of you who would like to respond, but do you have any strategies or advice for the people in the room today on how that is best managed?
Well, I can say that one point it's happening in Brazil is that security professionals, keeping being security professionals, but we are becoming as well business professional, businessmen and businesswomen, because if you need to have more confidence and more authority with your executives when we're speaking about executive protection, we need to understand the results of the business as well. Because you need to understand if your business are growing, if your business have organic growing, or if your business is buying other companies, if you have a layoff, because unhappy people can do a lot of bad things, physical and on social media as well. So if you really want to protect your executives, we need to understand the situation of your business, because the temperature of your decisions really depends on it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always, if I'm talking to the higher echelons, I always try to ask them, what do you think executive protection is? And they think about the detail, maybe residential, that type of stuff. And I say, well, you know what? If you actually build this out in a sustainable way, and by the way, this doesn't mean lots and lots of people, you should look at executive protection as solidifying corporate governance. You have your decision makers safe, accounted for, and in contact. So when you bring it to the board at that level, say, wow, this is solidifying our corporate governance, that adds a whole nother value. Often we talk about, well, we're protecting their time, we're smooth logistics, we're making them more effective and happier, and able to facilitate even more business, but they can actually quantify that sustainable corporate governance to stakeholders. And that money that they spend, if thought about from that strategic level, it can be way better spent in the absence of an attack or an embarrassing situation or an accident happening. And wrapping the board's mind around that, I have found, has been really helpful.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Tim said, executive protection is not a standalone, right? It's part of the overall security program at the company. So you have to, drill that, nail that down with them. Okay, there's going to be a program. And within that program is executive protection. A big part of it, as I said, is the threat assessment. So executive protection can go up, it can go down, right? It can ramp up according to what that threat level is that you're seeking to address at that particular period in time.
I think just to throw one more caveat on that, I think, and Tim brought it up, it's what is the definition of executive protection? And it's like the idea of what is security. The number of times people think I'm a security guard, or they go, oh, security, it's lights, cameras, and locks. Well, no, it's not. It hasn't been since 1947. Defining executive protection that isn't bodyguards, secure drivers, and armored transport. That executive protection is your online threat assessment. Executive protection is your comm strategy, your panic buttons, your mobile applications that can help track and make sure CEOs or C-suite are in communication. That's actually executive protection, and changing the definition of words that people know. I mean, I think the biggest challenge in security is when someone goes in and they're an engineer and they say, hey, we're building a power station, it needs to look like this and go here. Everyone's like, all right, you got it, you're the engineer. But when security walks in, everyone's like, no, I know that too. And it's stopping that and correcting it before you go and have to hire 37 security guards and executive protection agents to fire them 3 months later. So really working on that definition.
And the theme from today that we've heard on other panels is just this importance of communication. And I think to all of your points about having that baseline discussion about what are these definitions, what's our risk tolerance, and is so critical for this program in particular. Tim, I wanted to go back to something you had mentioned earlier, just about executives and their reluctance at times to accept executive protection. Do you have any words of advice for how security leaders can deal with a situation where it might not be board mandated to have EP, but an assessment has shown that the risks are there and that it might actually be in their best interest to accept certain measures? And if they resist that and refuse it, then what?
Yeah, you got to, we talked before in some of the earlier panels about, leadership is influencing, like when you do not have responsibility over somebody, right? And you need to get out there, make some friends amongst the company and say, look, if a CEO were to leave a company just under normal circumstances, the stock price is going to drop, right? If something tragic were to happen, like with United Healthcare, the impact to the company is catastrophic, right? And so that's a risk that, what's your risk appetite? Are you willing to take that on? And you hate to put it in stark terms like that, but, sometimes you have to do that.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have input on that particular question? Just wanted to.
It could be a great time to give somebody a flat tire so they can't go do the thing they want to do.
Fair enough. Well, Colin, since you just volunteered, I'm going to ask you the next question. Thank you for that. What is one overlooked shift or trend that you think will define the future of and the evolution of executive protection?
See, I know I'm supposed to give you one. I think there's two. And Tim actually mentioned both of them. One, I think, is your workplace violence. And actually, more broadly, I think it's your insider threat or insider risk, depending on which vernacular you want to use. And highlighting the importance of that. I mean, the program was created to protect and safeguard classified information. The term has evolved into protecting the workplace and the people in it and being proactive doing so. It's a terribly named program, if I'm being honest. But the purpose of it is proactive engagement to prevent bad things from happening from within. Yep. So that's number one. And then I think number two, when you talk about the Luigi effect, what social media and public perception is doing in the event of something tragic happening. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say United Healthcare's policies were all great. I mean, I think everybody here could say, oh, I love my healthcare company. But at the end of the day, what happened was absolutely wrong and tragic and should have never happened. And Luigi should not be supported. But now we're dealing with a phenomenon where he's getting incredible amounts of support. And I'm terrified of the landscape should jury nullification be a thing. And I think it's something we're not talking about enough. It takes one juror to go, no, I like Luigi. And now you have a whole new problem. So I think it's two issues. But those are the two that I think when you look at what modern executive protection is, it's dealing with this new sort of social media threat, but it's also looking at it inside a little bit differently than we're used to.
Very solid points. And in our last minute, do any of our other panelists have differing views or other trends that they could foresee impacting executive protection of the future?
I completely disagree with Colin. Oh no, that was the first panel of the day.
Along the lines of what Colin said, with what's posted out there online, it's like never be. I spent 20 plus years in the FBI. collaboration between the law enforcement and the public, especially for my old agency, you know, it was not great at one point, but now it's better than ever. But the thing about it is, like, they'll give you intelligence about what you need to do, but they're not going to give you the resources to execute on it, right? You need to build out that program internally, keep up your relationships, but when it comes down to it, a lot of what we're seeing out there, you know, falls below that level of what's criminal, right? So they're not going to go out there and, you know, put someone in handcuffs or something they put online, right? You know, you're the one who's going to have to mitigate it. So the relationship needs to be there, but you need to be ready to act.
Well, in just under 20 minutes, we covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure that people in the audience have much more to talk with these subject matter experts on in this topic, but thank you all so much for sharing with us.